So when the guy he explodes out the window and Vince doesn't even hardly react, it's like, get it? It's entertainment. Stop treating us like like we're
Yeah.
some, diabolical, insidious, we're trying to ruin your children.
Prime time backstories.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. I've got a very special guest joining me. We talk about over the years with the golden era, and I like to refer to those years as the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, and then we went into the Attitude Era. And if you are a big fan of the WWE, you know and watched how the company evolved. And you saw a lot of great superstars, you saw a lot of great storylines, but I hope that you also noticed the way it looked. And when you say that, you're talking about how the product was presented, how it was promoted. And behind the scenes, there was a lot going on. And Chris Chambers, who joins me now, and full disclosure here, we have been friends for many, many years, since our early 20s. We started in New York City together, working for Major League Baseball Productions. And really, just as what they called the viewers, loggers, we would sit and watch videotapes of Major League Baseball games all day long. And we will get into that at some point when we have our discussions ahead. But I wanted to bring Chris in today, especially as we're doing this recording. It is right before Super Bowl Sunday. And one thing that really stands out to me when you talk about promoting professional wrestling and the WWE is that they did mainstream. They realized that in order to reach their audience, they were going to have to reach this massive globe out there. And what better way to do it, at least at this point in time, than buying a Super Bowl spot? Now, you know how expensive they are, which is just amazing. That's something else to talk about. But the creative that went into it, and Chris was a huge part of it. And I'm going to get into your background, but first, Chris, let's talk about this Super Bowl spot, which, people thinking like, what in the world would the World Wrestling Entertainment Company want to do something like this? So I'm going to take you back now and tell me how that all started. How did that evolve?
Well, it is an interesting backstory. I do just want to mention though, it was you who dragged me into the WWF at the
Kicking and
time. I was
screaming.
happily doing This Week in Baseball back in the end of 1992 World Series. And then because of you, I got dragged into this world
Well, if
30
I can take
something
credit for
years
that,
later.
yeah,
So we
I'm
kind of
happy.
crossed over.
Yes.
So, anyways, by the time we did the Super Bowl spot, I joined the company in December of 92. So 93 kind of really kicked in with Raw and all that. So the Super Bowl spot was 1999. So what was happening in 1999, the Attitude Era was in full gear. I mean, we were cranking, with Stone Cold and everything was just going full gear. And so we were really popular at that time. And at that time, on Monday nights, we were actually outrating Monday Night Football when it came to the key get demographic for
Yeah.
men, 18 to 34. We were killing them. So they kept trying all kinds of things, bringing in Dennis Miller and all this stuff. Well, along with a lot of all that positive, attention comes negative attention. And in 99, there was this thing called the PTC, and they were complaining about us being too edgy. Even though we aired
Yeah.
at 9 o'clock at night, back then Raw was 2 hours, 9 to 11. We were TV 14, whatever the ratings were suitable. And of course, we're entertainment, and for some reason we had to be held to a different standard. So this PTC started complaining and blah, 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 blah. And we were just starting to get negative publicity at a time when we were still on the rise and it was kind of hanging out there. So I don't remember exactly how the opportunity came up, but I do remember Vince mentioning that we had an opportunity to do a Super Bowl spot. And at that time, it was an ungodly sum for us. It was like $500,000. Now I don't even know what they're like 10 million.
Yeah.
But it was like
Yeah.
for us back then, that was a lot of money. And we didn't have big budgets at that time. So what happened was, Vince had gotten to a point where he trusted a lot of us. And at that time, myself and David Sahadi were collaborating a lot on a lot of different projects, attitude spots, whatever, just a lot of spots.
Yeah. Quick
And
background they'll give us on David so that they know who you're talking about.
David was the head of our promos, and he would do a lot of the cold opens for pay-per-views and things like that. And David and I became good friends. Our offices were next door, and so we would do a lot of things. I would have an idea for something, and I wouldn't know what to do with it or how to execute. And we'd bounce ideas off each other all the time.
Yeah.
And back then, he didn't know how to edit. I taught him how to edit, and we just did a lot of. And I didn't know how to direct cameras, and he taught me how to direct cameras, down the road. So it was just a really, really positive collaboration. So at that time, Dave and I had a lot of success, and Vince had reached out to us about doing a Super Bowl spot. So we were trying to look for some inspiration, knowing that a lot of this other stuff was going on, and Dave and I would do our best work because I was working on shows, he was doing promos, but every once in a while, a couple times a week at least, we'd try to take a break and go to Starbucks. I didn't even drink coffee.
I was gonna say it wasn't a bar.
I'd get a decaf. Oh no, this was during work hours. So we'd go to Starbucks and we'd just bullshit and we'd come up with different ideas.
Yeah.
So this particular time, it was the Super Bowl spot. And
Yeah.
we were like, if we're going to do this, we got to come up with a concept. And at that time, um, one of the more popular promos that was going on at that time were the ESPN had just started the This is
Mhm.
Sports Center.
Right.
And then part of it is, here's a hockey player working in in catering or, whatever. And we were just like,
Oh.
you know, those are really well received. And for some reason, wrestling has always, and particularly WWE, it's a different standard than regular sports. We don't get the same, I don't know, it's like the critiques, everything is different. So we're like, maybe there's something there. Maybe if we do something like that, like a day in the office, at WWE. So we sat in Starbucks, and I'm not lying to you. It took us 15 minutes at the most. We didn't even finish our coffee. We had the whole spot written, the whole spot written. And the whole
So how did that
idea,
go? Like, give me the idea. Like, what were you doing? Spitballing and
yeah, we were just, why don't we start it off this way? And the whole idea was to do a day in the office, but the whole thing tongue in cheek.
yeah,
Okay. So when Steve starts with, we're just good old fashioned family friendly entertainment,
yeah, yeah,
that was a little bit of a dig at the PTC who was saying we're terrible and kids shouldn't be watching it and we're causing all kinds of problems with this, because back then, honestly, we did do a lot of bra and panty matches and stuff like that. So it was a little dicey. So we were doing that. And then, of course, the payoff is Steve hitting the guy with a
Mm.
chair
The
over the
chair. Yeah.
back because it's like, hey, we're good old fashioned family
Yeah.
friendly entertainment. Whap!
Whap.
So right away, you're like, what the?
Yeah.
So now we got your attention. And then it goes on from there. And then, of course, the my favorite couple of finishes, of course, was we're just trying to make it a better place for all mankind, for
Yeah.
mankind, and of course that's the character of mankind. And then Vince, this is the key, the go home line, which we were still struggling with how to deliver. Get it was twofold. One, hey Rob, Monday Night Raw, watch, get it. WWE, get it. It's a
Yeah.
good product. It's fun. It's entertaining. It's sports entertainment. Hello. But the other part of it was get it. It's not real, And so when the guy he explodes out the window and Vince doesn't even hardly react, it's like, get it? It's entertainment. Stop treating us like like we're
Yeah.
some, diabolical, insidious, we're trying to ruin your children. So we did the spot and Vince loved it. And he of course he was in it and he approved the creative and all the boys loved participating. And
Yeah.
David did a great job directing. He directed the whole thing. At that point I was still doing shows. So the, the shoot was right across. You remember we used to work at 120 in the
Yeah.
TV studio, or as Santino used to refer to it as the Death Star. which I still think is hysterical because
Yeah.
that's what it looked like. And so we shot David shot with his team the whole promo over at the tower. And it was the first time we actually were able to spend a significant amount of money on a shoot, not just getting people in, but having a stunt coordinator and a pyro, with the pyro and the window blowing up. They actually had to replace that window. They took it out and put, a stunt glass in there and did the whole thing. And they had, the pads and the whole thing. And it was the first really, really big shoot like that we got to do after proving ourselves 95, 96, all the way through. And then it was finally, all right, we get to do something on the biggest stage of all, the Super Bowl. So it
Yeah.
was really cool.
It really is a great spot. And you talk about, conceptualizing it. And you've got, Stone Cold kind of starts it out and he's very straight and we are just family friendly. And then the idea of having all this insanity going on behind you. But was that always kind of the idea when you started going into it and you were talking about the ESPN spots? But, as you mentioned, WWE was kind of always held to this crazy standard and it followed through with the rest of the business where they used to have the athletic commission involved, and it was kind of like, come on. And was it after all this, like you said, a chance to take a few liberties here and to tell people like, come on,
Of
do you
course.
get what's going on
You
here?
get Kane in the background making copies, like
Yeah,
he's in full gear. It's like, hello, we
yeah,
don't take ourselves that seriously. Relax. It's entertainment. Enjoy it. And the truth was, we were still ourselves going through a big transition because when I started in the company, it was real in character and kayfabe.
right.
Everything was kayfabe,
Carney,
and
yeah,
yeah, and it was really hard. Someday we'll get to my very first day on the job with you, which was Green Day and
memorable.
nails, the whole thing. That was my first day.
Yeah,
I was like, what the hell am I doing here? But it was so different, like in 93, 94. And then the change for me started in 95. I was able to do something that Vince liked.
yeah,
And he then kind of trusted me. And then same thing with David had already done some really nice opens for the original Monday Night Raw and things like
yeah,
that. But the creative was still behind where we wanted to go. Like,
yeah.
and we were being held back a lot. We had ideas and we weren't really able to execute them because we hadn't broken down that wall yet where they allowed us to be super creative.
Yeah,
But
and the pressure was there. I mean, come on, you're going to put together a spot that's going to air on during the Super Bowl at great expense. Tell
greatest.
me though about that pitch, and we've talked about this before. At some point you've got to go to Vince, and you got to lay it out. So relive that for me.
Well, so back then, and it's like I'm trying to remember that specific one, but back in those days, it took a while for Vince to want to listen to what we had to say. And that's another whole story. We'll get into that at another time. But it had gotten to the point where Vince was so pleased with a lot of the stuff we had done, like I said, the Attitude Spot, there were so many different projects that he had set up a meeting with me and David every Thursday. And we would just go
Oh,
over and pitch stuff. And a lot of times we didn't have ideas. We would just like wing ideas and do whatever. And Vince would like, even if he had a meeting, he'd kick everybody, all right, get out. And he would like, come on in, guys. And we would just fucking pitch ideas.
yeah,
Well, at this point, Vince did like the idea of doing this thing tongue in cheek and to, do the takeoff on SportsCenter. And because he wanted us to be bigger, bigger, bigger. At that point, we were getting bigger and bigger. And he wanted to be at the forefront and he wanted to be, you remember when I started, Vince didn't want anything to do with being on camera, with being a character, whatever. All that changed later in the Attitude Era with Vince Russo, and that's another whole story from the Montreal screw job and all
yeah,
that. We'll get into that another time. But at this point, Vince was comfortable with being a character, but even making fun of himself because he wasn't Mr. McMahon in that promo. He was Vince McMahon. He
yeah,
was, get it? He wasn't, get it? he got it too, is the point. And so he got it immediately. There's sometimes it's a harder sell with
Yeah.
this than other times, but he got this immediately. He was all in. He made sure all the talent was there. I mean, this was the one project I can't believe how complicated it was, but how smoothly a lot of it went. Now, of course, during the shoot, Dave will have, I'm sure, tons of stories about this could have gone wrong or that or the other
Yeah.
thing. But it didn't. And then it was an easy edit because each scene was laid out exactly with the transitions with the guy. We knew the wipes, how we were going to do the wipes with the person walking across and the whole thing. All of that was pre-planned.
Right.
So it was shot, in an afternoon. It didn't take long. I hear these stories about people shooting these Super Bowl spots and it takes forever, crazy locations and all this other stuff. We just knocked it out,
Yeah.
but with great help, like I said, from Vince, and he was really supportive and all in on it from the beginning. Not so much on some of the other ideas I
Right.
had or
Right.
David had. Those are stories for another time, but
So,
he
so was
was.
it one of those where you're sitting in the room and then I remember, different times where somebody would say something to or pitch something to me and he'd kind of like, I
Uh,
love it. Was it kind of like one of
yeah,
those
he,
when
he he was all in right from the beginning.
yeah.
But believe me, I've had a couple of those other ones where, God damn, what is this shit? Who wrote? I'm like, oh God.
Yeah, he didn't hold back. You always knew where you
Oh.
were on
No,
something.
I almost got fired once for Stone Cold, and yeah, that's another story. That's a story in itself. Holy moly. Yeah, I almost got fired for that, but
Oh boy, I
but in
can't
the
wait
end,
to hear these.
well,
We are going to get into them, but with this
yeah,
spot though, you say that it went pretty simply, but there was a lot going on in that
yeah,
spot. And first of all, how did you even select, okay, which talent we're going to want in here? I mean, of course, you've got your big guys, but and then how did you figure, okay, how do we use them?
well, you had to start with Steve because Steve was the biggest talent at the time,
Hmm.
and that is always a challenge, like who wants to be in these things. And at the time, politically, and you know how that goes.
Sure, everybody did, yeah.
Sometimes they do. There was a time when nobody wanted to work with the office, right? And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden it's like everybody wants to work with the office. And some guys and girls are easier to work with than others. And honestly, and Dave, we had the list of the talent that we wanted that worked creatively. And there were some we just wanted to be careful with because, you, Undertaker, things like that. You just have to be a little more careful. Mankind
Yeah.
was in transition he was transitioning, so it was kind of fun. We could do different things with him, and of course, having some of the female talent in there is just for the eye candy, which we were doing a lot back then.
Yeah.
But
It was interesting to see, Rock with hair.
yeah,
These you could see like these guys were still getting there, and then and I know that really did stand out to me because you've got Undertaker, which wasn't like he never talked, but you just weren't used to seeing him address, you know, directly at the camera, saying these lines, that were certainly unusual. So that did stand out, and I think that part of it, like you said, it was like, come on, folks, we don't take ourselves that seriously, and we are entertainment.
well, we are, and the irony of it is this is like um, so we do that spot, right? And
Yeah,
it's basically a Sports Center spot, right? But
yeah,
it's WWE. Well, some years later, what does Sports Center do?
yeah,
They get Stone Cold.
yeah,
He's sitting in the cafeteria at ESPN, and here comes Dan Patrick, and Dan Patrick, oh, Steve, you look a little
yeah.
down today. You need a little boost. And Steve's, yeah, I could use some. And he takes a chair and whams him across the back, and he goes, how was that? And he goes, I could use another one. Wham, hits him again. See, oh yeah, that's pretty good. So it's like even they got it. You know what I
Well,
mean? And
and then
here we are
also,
doing business with them now, but
right.
even they got it and thought it was funny. And it took, it was years later, but that's what it was, and it's funny though, for some reason in the mainstream media, we definitely were always treated differently. I
Yeah.
and whether you our performers were treated differently than actors and also differently than athletes. We were treated like something different that wasn't acceptable.
Yeah.
And the truth was, a lot of the things we were doing were more entertaining, more athletic, and our stars were becoming bigger stars. And
Yeah.
as such, a lot of the athletes and even actors at that time wanted to be involved in the product. And that started happening kind of after that. It was like, hey, yeah, this is kind of fun, and we had all kinds of people get involved. And now you see it all the time,
Yeah.
whether it's, Jelly Roll or even, Bad Bunny or folks like that. It's really, I think it opens some of those other doors going forward. And and again, a lot of the heat was getting ramped up in 99 into 2000 and 2001. And at that point, the attitude era, was starting to change a little bit. And we changed too. You gotta, you evolve with everything.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's off topic a
No,
little.
but it really is tied into what was going on then because you mentioned today, I don't even know if the line's blurred anymore. I think that, the crossover, as you said, you mentioned them doing a spot with ESPN with Stone Cold. But back then it was still very real. And the company had, been in this war and had
Yeah.
emerged and found a new way to do this. But a lot of it was over the top. I mean, like you mentioned, it went, my era was all about family friendly. It really was that, they
Yeah.
wanted the kids and the family in the crowd. And at that point, boy, they really had
Well,
stepped over the line with not just sexist or the violence they're doing, the sexual innuendo, and it was
Well,
really wrong.
what happened was the product was horrible. Okay. And we were getting our butts kicked and
Yeah,
the steroid trial happened and all that. And the
yeah,
sponsors left. And even then, Vince wanted to keep it clean because of all the negative publicity. And we were getting killed. And it was so bad they were taking the water coolers out of the building. We didn't even get paid for a couple of pay periods. It was so bad. That's another, we'll get into that at some point too. But so when we started to turn the corner, Vince, he kind of put it on all of us to help him turn the corner.
mm.
That was a really interesting day too. But
Well, do you want to get into that? I mean, just that meeting, I think that because it did change things, and especially
it did.
creative. And I
When,
people need to understand also, Chris, that that creative team was very small. It was a very small circle, correct?
yeah,
It's not like
it was really small.
talk
It,
about that.
it was well. So this is at the time, and a lot of people have heard about the meeting in Indianapolis that Vince had with the talent. And this was the same week. Vince came into the TV studio. We had a small conference room upstairs, and he called a meeting. And this is like, again, we were getting crushed. I mean, crushed.
And when was this?
WCW.
Give us a date era, a time, a
This
period
would
then.
be probably right in that. I'm kind of, when did Nitro start? So it was probably in that 95 era,
Mm.
96, maybe
Yeah, so it
90.
was bad then. It was
We were,
bad. Yeah,
oh God, we were
period.
terrible. We were
Yeah.
really terrible. I think it was 95, 6. Okay,
Okay.
somewhere in there. And I'm getting old, so my dates get mixed up. But what happened was it was the same year that that Indianapolis thing happened, and he sat down with us and said, "Guys, I don't know what I'm doing anymore, and I need your help." And all of us were like, "Whoa, this is the guy who didn't
Uh,
usually take
yeah.
he didn't want input from anybody on anything, characters, whatever." And it was myself and Dave
Mm.
Sahadi, Kevin Dunn, Jim Johnson, Vince Russo, and there may have been one or two other folks in there. I just
Were
can't think of.
those the words he used? Did he say, guys?
Yeah, yeah.
It's,
And he said, "I need your help," and he's never said that
yeah,
before.
yeah.
And to a man, we went around the table and we all threw out, "Vince, if you let us, we have ideas." And the ideas involved graphics, music, the set. I had a million ideas that I
Mm.
had been sitting on, and Kevin knew that. And because I had
Kevin
discussed,
Dunn.
yeah, we had discussed a lot of different things. And so when that meeting happened, after that meeting, Vince left, we all sat around and we just started riffing. And we had, oh my God, we had so many different things cooking already. And then, bigger things, like the stage and the Titantron and all that. I mean, there were just so many different ideas and the change of music, the graphics, how we did everything. Everything changed instantly.
Mhm.
And it was Vince saying, letting us go. And so, where I'm going with the story, the point of this story, and I can get into details another time, is once we started down that path, Vince told us, he goes, you guys keep going. There's a line, go over the line. It's my job to pull you back.
Wow.
Okay, so that's what he told us. So
Yeah.
we'd come up, and Russo, oh my God, he had a lot of crazy ideas. We all did, and they did. We did push ourselves over the line. I broke rules. I broke a lot of rules, especially even then, with the Stone Cold stuff. I used the word ass
Mm.
in the script, and Vince lost his mind, but it became his thing,
Yeah.
after that.
Right.
But anyways, he told us, go too far. My job is to pull you back. And that's what we did. And so naturally, there's a point where it did get a little out of hand, I have to admit. But
Well, did he, when you would go and pitch him, because of course it's one thing for him to say, look, and you've heard it before, like you go doing whatever you got to do, and I'll pull you back. Uh, but did he, when you would go and pitch these ideas that were like really out there, and you've told me a few, um, was it really when it came down to it for him to say to really let go, or did he just let you do it?
some of the things we did, he didn't know we were
Like, do
doing.
you remember like one of the first things that you felt really started to make a difference, or did you felt like, okay, now we're making an impact?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things, but I think one of the things, and once Vince let go, okay, was um, I had convinced Kevin Dunn to change the set. Now, at this point, you got to understand, we were like in high schools. We were like,
Jeez.
it was
Yeah.
bad. We're in
Yeah.
Poughkeepsie, at the, like tiny little.
Binghamton.
Yeah.
Binghamton. Yeah.
So I had talked Kevin into creating this monstrosity, which was the stage and the Titantron and the whole thing. And I got inspired by a couple things. One was Steel Wheels Rolling Stones tour
Yeah.
that I had been to a couple times, and then
Mhm.
also a AC/DC concert where they used, these ramps going out and the way cameras, would shoot across the thing. So you wanted to get into this now? This is like
Yeah, that's
okay.
keep
Okay.
yeah,
So
you're going here. I'm gonna
so the idea behind that was to create a stage. Anybody on a stage is a star, right?
yeah.
So make a stage, okay? And then the ramp would go down to the ring, and the ring would be the second stage. Stage up here when you enter, everybody can see. You can see
Hmm.
from the back. The person's on the stage, they're elevated. You go to a concert, you're on a stage. You go to a Broadway show, they're on a stage. Let's make a stage.
Big.
Big stage.
Big stage.
Monstrous stage. And
Yeah.
then the towers, we had these spotlights, and then the ramp. The ramp idea came honestly from an AC/DC concert that I had seen in, I think it was in Australia, where they were going out on the ramp. But the Stones had the same idea.
Yeah.
And then the Titantron, the screen was just me because besides entrance videos, one of the most frustrating things about going to a TV taping or a show is you have no idea what the hell's going on. But with the screen, you can see
Uh,
what's going on backstage. They can throw, show a package. You see an open to the show, so you know when the show
yeah.
is beginning. And those TV
So
tapings in the old days were horrible.
prior to that, really, how, and that's a great point that, you go to these arenas, and now, of course, we're very used to and it's not like Jumbotrons weren't new, but at those events, they really didn't have screens that people
no,
could see. And then when you're
no.
looking at it, it's that
They
little
had these
guy down
little,
there.
yeah, they had these little screens up for a while on Superstars, with these
Yeah.
little graphics, but they didn't have big, and they weren't inclusive, meaning like, oh, I see that guy got into a fight with that guy backstage. Now
Yeah.
it's gonna, so it was a storytelling tool along with a creative tool. So, anyways, the other thing is the thing that stuck in my head with the Steel Wheels Rolling Stones tour, and it was the greatest thing. I saw it twice. The before the Stones came out, there would be the warm up band, and they were good. Living Color, it was really
Right.
good. The whole arena would go black, and the crowd would be like, "Oh," you could feel the anticipation.
Yeah.
And then they started playing this pulse music, like boom, 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 and you could feel the crowd going like higher and higher. And then it would stop, and then you start cheering, and then the pulse would go bum, 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 bum. It would start getting faster, and then it goes out, and then they hit that first chord of "Start Me Up," and it would be Pyro, and all the
Oh
lights
man.
would come on at the same time. And I'm like, that's how to start a show.
Yeah.
So what we did was,
It's like Undertaker on steroids.
yeah, so we did the pulsing and all of that, but that
Yeah.
was for the house, and then the boom and all that was for
Hmm.
later. So, anyways, here's the story. If you want to hear this part of the story. So I'm trying to sell this to Kevin, and he's like, "We're not selling any tickets. This is going to take a hockey rink, to get into." And I said, "Yeah, but here's what you do. The rinks are shaped like this. Push it all the way to the end and sell tickets. And as we get more popular, we can just slide the thing back. And eventually, believe me, people will come because it'll be like a rock show."
Yeah.
And he's like, "I don't know." Well, then he was like, "Well, we got to test this thing out." So I'll never forget this. I don't know how I talked him into this, but we built a mock, we built a set and we set it up in the New Haven Coliseum. There was nothing going on. There was no show. We weren't there. We were on the road doing other things. And so they set up the stage, the ramp, the towers, the Titantron. And Kevin and I walked in and I looked at it. I was like, oh
Holy.
my God, if this doesn't work, we're fired. This is fucking huge. And it's like, oh my God, oh my God. So what happened was Kevin said, fuck it, let's go. We got the price and we had to cut a few things out. We couldn't do these big towers and all that kind of shit that we had for the spotlights.
Yeah.
So the first night we used it, it was funny. I don't even remember where it was, but it wasn't in a giant arena, but it was an arena big enough that we could put this thing. Kevin talked Vince into, look, we've been changing things. Let's try this. Blah, 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 blah.
Wait a minute, but though, did Vince come to see the mock set,
No,
or you didn't want him?
no,
You're
dude,
like,
this is part of the story. This is part of the
oh,
story. So
okay.
this is what's funny. This is the beginning of him trusting us and letting us do things.
Oof. Yeah.
Okay. So back then, Vince was still an announcer. So this is you're going back to, I can't even remember what year that was. So he was still an announcer. So he, as you know, at TV, he's busy. He's talking to the boys, he's going over finishes, he's doing the thing.
Mm.
So he hadn't really, at this point, this was before he was freed up to do the stuff later where he'd go out and, work on
Right.
stuff. So he saw the set, but he didn't see it in action, whatever. So he gets on headsets, right? And he's sitting directly across from the Titantron. And he says to Kevin, and he goes, "God damn, I don't get this, Kevin. This looks like a big fucking waste of money to me." And Kevin goes, just wait, friends. It's going to be fine." Boom, the blackout happens. The pulse starts.
Dun, 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 dun.
And then boom, the thing hits and Jason
Pyro.
shooting line rockets down. And then we had the open on the screen. And when the open was rolling, Vince goes, "God damn it, I get it now. That's great shit." And so from then, that was our set. And then
So you heard that over the head because he had the headsets on. So.
yeah, you can hear it back in TV studio. We would hear, the conversations back in the TV studio. And Kevin likes to tell this story too, because he was relieved too, because he's on the front line. I'm at least back in Stamford. He was freaking in the truck waiting for Vince's head to explode when he sees how much money we wasted. but it worked. And then what happened was, I guess people on TV liked it because the ticket sales, it started really quickly, and we started moving that stage and screen back. It didn't take long. It was a matter of weeks, and it was filling up. So, you know, sometimes like as I get a little older, I forget the order of things, but that was a big event too. Like Vince, like once he had that meeting and he threw his trust out, and there were a lot of things we did where he's like,
Yeah,
I don't know, including this stage screen and all that.
yeah.
But the wonderful thing about Vince McMahon is if he, it doesn't matter if it's his idea or not. If it's a good idea, he likes it.
Hmm.
He'll also take ownership of it, which is fine. He's the boss, but he'll jump on board. When you first work with, he's very intimidating, and he's scary,
Yeah.
but
Oh yeah.
he's like, I've never met somebody who can be, we're not doing that. That's the worst idea. And then he sees it and goes, God damn, that's good shit. He had that capacity to just forget what he said and go the other way. And I really admire that. And this was one of those cases,
Yeah.
you know.
But do you think, Chris, during that time though, because up to there, up until that meeting where he said, guys, look, he came to an epiphany of its own, that he did change. I mean, because, prior to that, I think,
Uh,
I
he,
don't want to
he
say that he
completely
was all, never wrong, but how do you think he changed after that as far as being more open to what you guys were doing?
he 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 was so much easier to work with and so much more appreciative. Now he was more demanding too because now we
Hmm.
were going, but it it used to be so different. It was more of an intimidating thing. Like you remember in Edit One, we used to have that spy cam where we
Yeah.
would see Vince coming in the parking lot in the old hunka-bunka
Clinet. Yeah.
mobile. Yeah, the
Yeah. Yeah.
Clinet, whatever the
Yeah.
heck, that the Excalibur or whatever it was. And then the announcement would go over the intercom, the cake is in the oven. The
Yeah.
cake is
Right.
and everybody, oh shit, even the guys
Yeah.
in master control, everyone would like get tense up and all of that.
Yeah. That camera wasn't for security. It
Oh
was.
no, no, that was the same to let everybody know when Vince was in the
Yeah.
building.
Yep.
And so it changed drastically because he even got a lot looser. He even dressed differently. I mean, it was like he understood what I think what all of us kind of intuitively knew all along, and that is it takes a team for
Hmm.
anything to work, like a big team. Like any superstar, we can all give a guy an idea, write a vignette or give a slogan or whatever. But it's really that person who has to make it happen. But there is a team behind them, whether it's the entrance music, the costumes, the storylines, of course, the direction. It takes a team. And I think that was the beginning of, and you have to understand, we were getting our asses kicked,
Yeah.
for a long time. So part of it was we didn't really have a choice. And the irony, and we can get into this another time too, but the irony is when we were at our worst, we had the biggest stars in the industry. They were just miscast.
Right.
They were in
Yeah. And
different
there's a lot
roles.
of stories too. Yeah. Yeah. And I've talked about that many times with,
Yeah.
The Rock, who wasn't
He
certainly
was
The
he was
Rock at the
Rocky
time.
Maivia,
Yeah.
and
And
Triple
Stone
H
Cold
was
was,
Hunter Hearst Helmsley, and Stone
yeah.
Cold was the Ringmaster. I
Yeah.
mean, you can go on and on. I mean, Kane was Isaac Yankem DDS
Yes. The
and Fake
dentist.
Diesel. So
Yeah.
which was great because that was to me that was the beginning of the end. The Isaac Yankems, the Pierre Lafitte's, the Goon, the Duke the Dumpster. Oh my God, Bastion. But these were all when I first started. I'm like, what? Oh my God, it was so bad.
Yeah. What the hell are we doing?
I said, what did I get myself into here?
Yeah. Well,
But
and it did, and thank God that they did finally reach that rock bottom. I mean, that's really
yeah.
what it would be described as.
Oh,
But
no, it was bottom.
yeah,
When they're taking the water coolers out of the building and they're
yeah,
telling you they can't pay you. Can
I
you
know.
stay? Do you trust us? Can you stay? We can't pay you. That's rock bottom.
Yeah.
Trust me.
And I do want to get into more about that team. Like you and I certainly understand that sometimes it's lightning in a bottle in a sense that like when we were with Major League Baseball productions and
Mhm.
there was a collection of kids. We were these kids that were fresh out of school, most of us, and just some really, really creative people that just by chance came together. In some ways, you look at it like this team that, of course, never gets a whole lot of credit for what you do because you're not in front of a camera.
Yeah.
But, you and Kevin Dunn and David Sahadi and Vince Russo, these,
Yep.
do you kind of look back at it now that when you sit around that room and it's kind of like the writer's room, it kind of takes me back to your show of shows when you talk about these people that were, a lot of people don't know maybe even what that show is all about, but the people that they had as far as their creative behind that were like Woody Allen and, all of these guys that were, tremendous creative minds. And really, and I know you're not gonna, you're a very humble person, but you guys changed professional wrestling forever. When you think about that, in a sense, like you said, you guys, you had nowhere else to go,
Yeah.
but out of it came some tremendous creative that benefited the industry to this day, changed it forever.
Yeah, and it was fun, and well, part of it too is we started to have fun. And once it's fun, like I loved working with Vince Russo. I've heard all kinds of crazy things on the internet. I don't really watch a lot of the stuff, but I loved working with him. He was very open to ideas and he was very easy to, go back and forth with. And then we had young guys like Adam Panucci and Doug LeBeau who were adding to the
Yeah,
to the mix as well, and they're both still doing it, by the way.
yeah.
And these guys had great ideas and great execution on things too, and it just continues. But I think part of it was all of us, we just want to contribute. You want to feel like we weren't. None of us were workers. You know what I mean? We were people who wanted to make an impact. And when I used to teach people in my department too, is like, do you want a job? Like, do you want this next guy's job, or do you want to make an impact? Do you want to
Yeah.
change things? And for me, that's what I always tried to do. Even when I did This Week in Baseball, I tried to do it a little differently than the people before me. And same thing at WWE, F, and then E. Um, uh,
It
so
really is amazing though. When I look back at what was happening at that time, and you said people like Vince Russo and this team, you have to not only if they're creative, but you have to figure out how to work with each other too.
Mhm.
When you guys like you said, it became fun.
Yeah,
Uh, like every week, did you guys start thinking about okay, what are we going to do with The Rock? What are we going to do with Stone
every
Cold?
week,
What? Yeah,
every week, but it was collaborative. For example,
yeah,
like Vince Russo was the reason why it was easy to work with. Like I helped with Rock with his third person and all that,
yeah,
but I helped Steve with his original promos. So Vince Russo would write the shows, and we would get for Monday Night Raw. This is before even SmackDown and XFL and all that came along. He'd have the shows, even though they looked like they were wild, like these shows were out of control. They were very scripted, and we'd have the shows by Thursday. He'd send them over to us, meaning me, Adam, Kevin, and we'd go through them, and sometimes we'd change the direction. But like anything with Steve, he would always ask me, would Steve say this? Is this in
hmm
keeping with his character? That kind of thing. And even when Steve was doing Celebrity Deathmatch, at MTV, I would get the scripts and make sure that it was, in his voice and it was okay for him. But anyways, but that's part of the whole team thing.
hmm
And so, yeah, it was really collaborative because sometimes, Vince Russo would get stuck with, I don't know what to do with this guy or character, and we'd come up with a crazy idea. Or, do you think the storyline works? Or do you have an idea? Or, whatever it happens to be. and he was working also with Ed Ferrara at the time. Ed was pretty easy to work with too, but Vince Russo was the lead writer, and he was the impetus to a lot of the crazy stuff. And it was Vince Russo, and I was there. I was in Vince McMahon's house when Vince Russo convinced Vince to become a character. Of course, that
Mm.
was after Montreal, but that was Vince Russo who talked him into doing that. So I'll give him credit for a lot of stuff. I liked working with him.
Yeah, was that though was that collaborative too that you guys knew that Vince has always had heat. As the owner of the company, everybody always knew he wasn't just an announcer and like who came up with that concept of saying, you know what, we need to take advantage of this that
Russo.
that
It was
really.
Vince Russo. It definitely was, and it was like Vince didn't want to do it because he made a promise to his father that he would never be a character, be in the
No,
ring,
no.
wrestle, do any of that. And so Vince McMahon was very reluctant to do that. But once Montreal happened, and then we did
Hmm.
the interview, the Brett interview. Just
Hmm.
popped in, I forgot about that. Um, that's when it started happening. And believe it or not, and this is a part that gets a little bit left out of the story, is part of the impetus to making Vince a character came from WCW because Kevin Nash and Scott Hall thought they were being funny by talking about the evil owner up north. We're
Right.
like, well, they're
Mm.
kicking our asses. Everybody's watching their show. They're talking about the evil owner up north.
Hmm.
Why not create the evil owner up? Let's do it. Let's
Yeah.
make Vince the evil owner. Go right there. He's the guy who owns the place. And of course, later comes Stooges and all that other stuff. But it's funny how things happen. Russo knew right after the Montreal screw job that Vince should be a character. Vince was reluctant, but then with WCW was burying Vince, we are like, he's already everybody hates him. Let's go with it. Why
Yeah.
not? And then when Vince got on board, once he got on board, oh my God, then he was obviously way on board. You
Yeah,
know.
and as we kind of go off track here as we
Yeah, I'm sorry about
talk
that.
about no, but this is awesome that you talk about that character, Mr. McMahon, which was I think one of the best ever runs of stuff that they had there. But do
Well,
you
all the
think
best
could it
characters are a little bit of reality. Let's be honest.
exactly there's a lot
Like
of truth
Steve,
to that.
Rock, Stone,
Yeah,
Vince. There's a lot
but
in there.
but do you think that character would have ever gotten over as much as it did if he didn't have the nemesis, if it wasn't for that Stone Cold character that went up against him? Do you think it would have ever gone over as big as it did if it wasn't for Steve Austin?
No, in
Yeah.
the part of it, Stone Cold, and then it was Rock and whatever, because the subtlety of it. This is the part that in the story that's so great, and people the owner. The thing that's so great about it is he couldn't. It drove him crazy because Steve was making him money. Steve the character,
Yeah.
but the evil owner wanted all the attention, but the attention was going, but so he couldn't get rid of Steve
Yeah.
because Steve made him money, right?
And he
So
was
when
over.
Steve,
I mean, the
right.
crowd wouldn't allow it. Yeah.
So when Steve got hurt and then the Rock thing started happening, and then of course Rock turned corporate, then it was even bigger
Yeah.
because now Vince is getting his money. He's got somebody who can beat Stone Cold Steve Austin in his own company, which
Yeah.
is it's funny. It's like the owner of a football team hating the quarterback, but he's got to keep him because he keeps winning Super Bowls.
It's,
It's like, what do I do with this?
yeah.
I need a better quarterback,
Yeah.
So
Well,
no,
like you say to those storylines, there's always some truth to it, and I'm sure there was some of that Vince didn't like the reaction that Stone Cold got because he really did have total control. It was in many ways the same thing that Hulk Hogan had for those early years that Vince
Mhm.
needed the Hulkster no matter what.
Yeah.
But this character certainly was completely different. But at the same time, Steve Austin was in total control, and it was really over.
And Steve's character was very genuine. I can assure you of that. And I
Yeah.
related to it. That's why I was able to work with him because I had gone through some stuff where I was didn't trust anybody. And yeah, it's a so he was just like he was great. I
Yeah.
mean,
I'll tell you that
and again, he was there the whole time. He was the ringmaster. And just think about this. Here's a guy who turns out to be, if not the greatest promo guy in history, he's in the top two or three.
yeah.
And Vince, when we signed him, thought of him as a good hand and put him with Ted DiBiase because he didn't want Steve talking because he wasn't any good on a microphone. And
Yeah.
it's like,
And people don't,
so
how
sometimes you never
close?
know.
Yeah, but how close did Steve Austin come to being a footnote? Really, if that wouldn't have
Close.
all happened, right?
Yeah, there was a lot of things that happened, and that's probably for another time. But yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of Steve almost left the company. He was very frustrated with the creative, and he was on his way out before he became, a big,
Who he became, yeah.
yeah.
And The Rock too. Right. The Rock is another story too. It seemed as that the two of them were almost at the end of the rope, and I'm sure the fact that you had a creative team behind them that helped them. But I'm sure at
Right.
some point they just basically said, fuck it. I'm just going to do what I think works for me. And then of course you
Well,
guys helped them.
but that's the point is
Yeah.
eventually it has to come from you.
Yeah.
Like I always say that, like you can help somebody with a gimmick or whatever, but it still has to come from them. They have to own it.
Mhm.
The greatest example may be Undertaker. He made that was Vince's concept and all that, but Undertaker owned it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
He made it work. I can't
Yeah.
imagine anybody else. That character is stupid when you think about it. He's a dead guy.
Yeah.
But he made it work, evolved it into different things, so much that he even became the American Badass and then came back to The Undertaker.
Yeah.
Who else could pull that off?
Yeah.
Just Mark Calaway, he's the only one who could have done that. But even, with Rock, I mean, the if you ever met it, I met him in person the first time, I was like, this guy's a freaking star.
Yeah.
It
Really?
and it was,
Right away you
yes,
saw that.
just meeting him in the gym. But he had horrible creative and a horrible gimmick. And that was at the end of when we stunk, so he was kind of trapped in that for a little bit. It wasn't him, it was bad creative. He wouldn't know that he was new. He had no choice. He had to go with Rocky Maivia, do that whole thing.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like I said, all those guys were there. They had bad gimmicks. They were miscast. The creative was not good for them. And because we weren't working as a team, it was more of a dictatorship at that point.
Yeah.
And once that changed, it didn't take long for the company to turn around once it changed. We went from, like I said, they're taking the water coolers out to like a year later, 2 years later, it's a publicly traded company.
Yeah.
It didn't take, it was amazing how quickly the turnaround happened. It was insane.
Well, and it's funny if you really think about it. You guys are all in the same place. Steve Austin and Dwayne Johnson, and you guys as a creative team, you're like, we're at the bottom here. Like if we just don't flip the table in all of them. I mean, I've heard both of them talk about it that they were just like I got to change. I can't depend on where Vince McMahon is taking me because if that's the case. I'm not, I'm done. I'm toast.
Mhm.
And so, it really, like you all said, F it. We're gonna go. And thank God that Vince McMahon was smart enough to say, okay, and let's see what you got. But it really is the story, like how things could have changed. I mean, that company may not even exist today. Who knows that road would have continued,
Well,
right? I mean, I know
if
you were
the,
looking,
well, it had to, the steroid trial. I mean, we didn't know if
no,
Vince was going to go to jail or not.
no,
And then the company's out of business at that point if he's gone.
Yeah.
And even after all the sponsors left, when we had to regroup. So no, it was a long, arduous road to get there. And once we got there, then it was almost like everybody was like, "Oh, I get it," and we're off to the races. But part of that again was teamwork and knowing that the talent was there and just giving them the proper platform to to express themselves and to become who they could be.
Mhm.
And and I think that's what made I feel very privileged to have worked with that. The first couple of years, I thought I made the biggest mistake of my life, leaving baseball
Yeah.
and going there
Yeah.
because creatively we were handcuffed. I couldn't really do anything. And I did start looking to get out because I was just like, I'm not going anywhere. But once we were able to turn that corner, man, it was so much fun. I couldn't
Yeah.
wait to go to work. I didn't even care about anything except for going to work. It was so much fun. We were doing so many cool things, and it's like every day. It was just insane,
Couldn't
like
wait to get there. And as you said, you guys were the ones who did get it. When it came down as we started this discussion with the Super Bowl spot, but there's so much behind.
went off track there.
Uh, yeah, no, but it was awesome, Chris. And really, you've got a million stories. A lot of folks, you have no idea about what really went on behind the scenes. And I'm going to start. I'm going to start digging with you, Mister, because I know you've got so many different stories to tell, and people have never heard them before. I'm telling you, Chris was there for more than 3 decades, and saw it did see pretty much everything, every era that took place from the wave when it was at its crest when you got there, and then how low it went, and then an era that came in that changed professional wrestling forever. So we're just getting started here. But Chris, really, that fascinating about that Super Bowl spot, and it makes sense to talk about looking back now when professional wrestling, who would have ever thought would do a Super Bowl spot? And they showed really then that the company really had arrived at that point.
It had, and
Yeah.
it was a really special time, and yeah, it was great, and it was a privilege doing it, working with Dave Sahadi on it. Dave and I actually went to that Super Bowl. Give a quick story.
You
His dad,
you can tell it now.
yeah, correct. It's Lou Sahadi, he's just an awesome guy,
Yeah.
just a great guy, a great writer. And Lou had hooked us up with tickets to the Super Bowl in Miami. It was
The
Denver.
WWE didn't even hook you up.
No, no. Lou hooked us up. He had a place in Boca. So Dave and I went down there and we're like, we're still off, the high of
Yeah.
we know the spot's going to run and we want to see it and this and that. And so we're in a bar and we're talking. We're like, I'm a Patriots fan. He's a Jets fan. We're like, do you really want to go to this game? We're like, nah. So we sold our tickets and we went to Joe's Stone Crab, and we had some drinks. We had a great dinner. We went out. We had a great time. Watched the Super Bowl
We got
somewhere
the
else.
spot. Got to watch the spot as
Yeah,
it went.
it was freaking great. And if it wasn't for Lou Sadi, we wouldn't have been able to do that. So it was a lot of fun. It was a really nice weekend, and honestly, Dave was a creative force back then, and that spot was a real big deal for the company in every way, in every single way, and it was fun to be a part of it. It really was.
Just incredible. Just unbelievable stories, Chris. And these backstories, I just want to tell you, we're just getting started. Chris Chambers, really, behind the scenes legend, really, for all that you were involved in. And you haven't even heard the beginning of it, folks. Really, he's just touched the surface on this, is we're going to be digging deeper into the backstories of the WWE and all the tremendous eras and how professional wrestling was changed by people like Chris Chambers and that creative team. And really want to thank you for joining us today, Chris.